Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we're bringing you day 720 of Russian war with Ukraine, as always with former advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel Alexei Arestovych, and Nikolay Feldman, Ukrainian journalist. Today they deep dive into replacement of Commander-in-Chief in Ukraine, Putin's interview, and other issues that are factors to developing events at the moment. Special thanks go to our members, Marina Arkatova and Darren Matthews. We appreciate your participation. That what helps us to continue producing these videos. Do not forget to click like, subscribe, and join this channel. Enjoy. Hello everybody, this is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolay Feldman. You're watching War Diary with Alexei Arestovych. Alexei is connected to us via stream. Good evening. Yes, hello everybody. We have a lot of information, reasons today, including Putin with his huge interview. Let's start with the front, especially Avdiivka. That's where our attention is for quite a few weeks to that geographic location. And we apparently received some reinforcements in that town, and as different media sources are writing that probably one of the best brigades entered Avdiivka. But still, many voices now can be heard in the same mantra that you've been talking for the last 2 months, that it probably would be smart to not miss the moment when to withdraw our troops. And perhaps we are at this moment now, but instead we have one of the best brigades entering the scene. As it is written, I don't know how true it is. What do you think? Is that moment here? Do we need to bring reinforcements or not? This is a very linear statement of question, Nikolay. We don't know the ideation of our command. Only knowing that we can say whether we can, whether it's right or not. In the internet, we see that 3rd Brigade, if it is 3rd, got a task to push the enemy from Supply Road. According to different data, there's only a couple hundred yards left to that. And as we understand, even though it is not exactly owned by enemy yet, it is under direct fire control of our enemy. And it became problematic quite a while ago when a couple months ago they captured a certain terracone there. But as of today, we don't know the ideation behind that maneuver, and right now there are heavy fights ensuing there. The enemy is using artillery, heavy aerial bombs, and again, fights in the town that is not prepared fully for defense. That's the most difficult story, and that's where the defenders lose their advantage, because they're localized in different parts of town, and the enemy has an opportunity to destroy them rather effectively. Depends what actions are they doing. If they're not repeating Popasna and Mariupol story, if they will not throw Russian troops in the street fights, and there'll only be artillery and aviation working predominantly, then our defenders will be at a very precarious position, but we'll see. So, regardless, do we know the idea of our command or do we not know, Alexei? You have called upon them to not miss the moment to withdraw. I think this moment is here, and I think you mentioned in Latinian interview that this is the situation now. Well, Nikolay, if they were withdrawing troops, they would not be adding reserves, right? So perhaps 3rd Brigade got a task to create a corridor that would allow others to withdraw. But if more troops are being thrown, that means that there is some idea behind that. Yeah, that's the only way to add reinforcements to the fight. So I don't know. I cannot even call these games dangerous because we don't have full information. Where are we going to withdraw them to? Is the 2nd line of defense ready? How ready is it? Perhaps they're finishing the construction of it, and now our troops are getting a task to hold till those positions are ready. Maybe some other event. We don't know, so that's why it is difficult to ultimately state if that moment is here or not. We can just state that it is a critical phase in defending Avdiivka. And critical phase does not mean that you have to withdraw. It could be a very cunning maneuver that you are pondering upon, and you possibly could think of, cutting the enemy's sides, flanks, and replaying the whole situation at large. But we don't know yet. Let's see. Well, you've been very accurate in your estimates today, but okay, thank you, Alexei. And you can probably, next topic we can comment about is change of commanders-in-chief. And recently, Zaluzhny was replaced, Zaluzhny, who was caring more about people, by Commander Syrsky, who is known for his attempts to hold Bakhmut. And do you think it could mean also that he would not, maybe, wanted to start his career by withdrawing from Avdiivka? Well, I think, Nikolay, that he was not allowed to withdraw from Bakhmut. I think it was political leadership that was telling him to still hold it. And here we also don't know if that is his own decision or whether political command gave him a task to hold Avdiivka, or maybe they consulted together and came to a joint conclusion that it makes sense to continue defense. We don't know. Okay, I got it. Understand your point of view. Let's look at the other interesting piece of news, that occupants are starting to use Starlink satellites, and it's commented upon by different sources, and Elon Musk specifically mentioned that SpaceX is not working with Russia, and apparently this equipment came from Dubai to Russian troops, and there are some sources that this story is artificially inflated, that Russian side was noticed in using Starlinks for quite a while already, and these cases are not mass. They're just some individual cases when they do use that, and perhaps it is just an additional effort to fight with other means, that other channels that Russia is getting technical equipment from in Europe and other parts of the world. So maybe that's an attack on them. What do you know about it? I know a lot of claims about that, and I've heard a lot of denouncements, including Musk himself. And it's been 2 years of war. I would be surprised if they haven't purchased a couple dozen Starlinks and tried them for that purpose, right? They're not sold in Russia, but you can buy them in another place, and the signal is there. I'm actually surprised that they still have not used it much. Maybe they don't want to set Musk up or something. I don't know the story behind that. But military are not beyond trying new technologies, so making some scary psyop from this fact when they tried to use something somewhere, it is too difficult of a combination. Psyops are too difficult a combination. They're trying to draw from it now. Psyops should be straightforward. Like Syrsky mom is in Vladimir now and she's liking Putin's posts. That's a very straightforward psyop that a lot of will bite. But when you have some serious secret mechanisms and schemes, those usually don't work. You usually need 1 or 2 steps to make it work. It's just somebody wrote that news, somebody got excited about it, and it fell on a rich soil of generally ambivalent position of Musk towards this conflict. It's easy to fan the flames of this news, and yeah, Musk did make quite a few statements that are not exactly supportive of Ukraine during this war, so yeah. All right, let's get back to a replacement of Zaluzhny with Syrsky. It is supported by statement from President Zelensky that he is expecting changes in the defense forces of Ukraine. First, he wants a detailed plan of war for 2024. Second, each brigade on the front line should get effective Western arms. Logistics should be streamlined. Generals should not be waiting for some warehouse to release their drones. They need to be more effective. There should be effective system of rotation built. Each general needs to know their scope. And right now, armed forces of Ukraine are about 1 million troops worth that were conscripted to defend our country. As of today, most of them have not really felt the front yet. It's only the minority of those that are on the front line. So there probably is needed a different approach for rotation. What do you think about these statements? How much they reveal the negative state of things in Ukrainian armed forces? And I was specifically triggered by the phrase that each general should know the front. So does it mean that generals are not generally not aware of where we are fighting and their tasks? These are very specific formulations, so we can see what Zelensky is being told. And it's interesting that they're also intertwined, because not everything on this page that is listed is in purview of commander-in-chief. Because front battle brigades need to be fully staffed and need to have Western equipment. This is not commanders-in-chief task. This is more of the Minister of Defense. So perhaps this is more what he meant to say, is to aggregate Western weapons closer to the front, not to really disperse it throughout everywhere. But that kind of implies that, okay, if you are doing rotation, you need to make sure your brigade, both sides, the one at the front and the one not at the front, they both should have Western arms, because otherwise, when you do the rotation, there'll be a replacement that doesn't have enough equipment. And then to follow his orders, you need probably twice more of Western equipment that we currently have. So that's probably more of his wishes than the actual state of things. What's characteristic for me, he did not outline the change of policies. He did not outline the training as the opportunity for improvement. He did not really speak much to human-centric, right, towards Syrskyi, the new commander-in-chief. The tasks that he is setting in front, it indicates that he is aware to some degree of the real troubles on the front, and he has a desire to change them. So let's see if he'll be effective doing it. Okay, what about the UAV and setting them up as a separate group of defense forces? Do you agree with that? Well, frankly, I guess we can let them be, right? There are missile defense troops, right? So this could be a standalone as well. Artillery is standalone as well. These guys can actually have their scope rather wide, because they can be used not only for attacks, for intel, for communication relay. So yeah, I guess we can see how it fares. There are a lot of voices finding concern, how will that be distinguished as a separate group of troops and separated from already existing ones. Well, look, brigade, for example, has an artillery group that belongs to that brigade, that belongs to a certain operative command, that belongs to a certain infantry command, and it also is matrixed and belonging to an artillery command, right? So let's call that there is a department of artillery, or department of UAVs in this case. So Sukharevsky got the status of second in command after commander-in-chief with his new troops, and it indicates what how important the level is that he's being given, how important his role is seen. So supposedly his detachments will be added to not only battalions but also to probably companies, each company on the front. So 2 years after this war, we finally see the recognition of the might of this technology, and then we created a new branch of military for that. Great. We added a good person, supposedly, who people are saying is capable military organizer, military manager, and his task as the commander of the new military branch is to develop it, and that includes application, it includes planning, training, and it will be used, that weapon will be used by commanders, operative commanders on the front locally. So as the commander of the air defense units, he's more looking about development of his system, creating repair systems, creating additional supply lines and all. So he's more in charge of making sure that this branch of military would exist, right? It's up to battalion or brigade or local troops to use this resource. But overall, it's an acknowledgement of a new kind of weapon that changed war, that is a rather strong factor. So I would welcome that. We'll see if that needs a correction, whether it was good or not, the whole strategy to do that. We'll probably see it a year from now. We cannot see anything sooner than that due to just simple bureaucracy and the way things work. So going back to Zaluzhny's firing, after the first meeting became known of Victoria Nuland with Rustem Umerov, the Secretary of State on Political Questions Victoria Nuland and US Ambassador Bridget Brink met on the 31st of January with the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Umerov, and they expressed their concern with Zaluzhny removal and suggested to somehow settle this case in a different fashion that actually sounded together with the Sullivan's concerns that he expressed from Washington. So, do you know if that happened? Is it true that Nuland indeed tried to prevent firing of Zaluzhny? Don't know, and I don't want to go into these rumors, Nikolay, because the question here is the main reason for removal of Zaluzhny, regardless of how people are looking for it, and for the juicy details of that, is that he did not share, and these are not rumors, this is official data and official publication in Economist and second publication before his firing. He did not share a president's approach to conducting this war. This is not a normal situation. You, for example, would not work with an operator in a studio who completely disagrees with the way you organize your stream, right? Even if it's the best operator in the world, but you personally do not match. So president just changed people to match his likes, who will execute his strategy of war effectively. How good the strategy is, we'll see, time will tell. You know my opinion. President also wants to win, and the only concern is that he is trying to win in the conditions when the Western support is dwindling, and one of the ways to win is to aggregate a lot of troops, another 500,000, and create a certain balance to Russian troops on the front, or at least that would allow, if not to win, then at least to create a certain weight on the front that would create a better negotiation position. And that's what he is trying to do. And Zaluzhny, from the article on the 1st of November in Economist, that he's not sharing the strategy. His main subject of concern is scientific and technological advantage, qualitative and quantitative, of Ukrainian troops. And this is a task for politicians, not to army. Army is just using whatever politicians manage to procure for that. And essentially, Zaluzhny stated with his article that I've done everything I could. And until you have a lot of good equipment from the West, a good equipment that would allow to get out of the stalemate with the UAVs used effectively by both sides, when the front line is separated by almost 7 or 10 kilometers, and each couple fighters, couple soldiers get targeted by UAVs. So just getting to your new trench is a whole quest there. So he basically said, there's not much I can do to effectively fight and preserve our army in these conditions. And they've been arguing probably since November. When Zelensky actually acknowledged that we went to a strategic defense, then he corrected himself, just like he did in a recent Italian interview. And they just don't match in their vision. That's it. But nobody would work with somebody who doesn't match your vision, even if it is the best professional in the world. And if you personally are not concerned about his professionalism, you know that he is good, but there is disagreement on strategic matters. And he basically replaced Zaluzhny's clan with the Syrsky clan in the defense forces of Ukraine, because Syrsky is a person who proved times and times again that he will do as he is ordered. Political rating definitely is also a factor, but I think for Zelensky, if he really wanted to fight with political rating of Zaluzhny, it would make more sense for him to keep Zaluzhny in his team, because then the fall of Avdiivka would be on his shoulders as well. It'd be a shared responsibility. Mobilization, the next wave, would also be somewhat related to Zaluzhny. But he decided to replace a group of generals with another group of generals that will be following his plan of war closely. Is it correct to just estimate then that the president has the right to change commanders as he wishes? Of course, yeah, that is his purview. That is his role, and he gathers the team that will be reaching the goals. And Zelensky still showed that he can make decisions, strong decisions, as he likes them to be. In my view, this is a somewhat late decision. Not that Syrskyi had to replace Zelensky much earlier, no. But that Zelensky needed to go deeper into the military issues and start addressing them. Because as I said about a year ago, that after Kherson operation, we needed to be changing what are we doing and how are we fighting this war. Because after that, we already could see the deficiencies that we had and the strengths that Russians already started to acquire. At that moment, everything could be changed rather easily. And yet, at the time, our allies also hang us by a thread. They lowered the amount of military support they were giving to us, and Russians used the time to dig deeper in the south, and we know the results. There were also other pieces of information floating around that Ambassador and Nuland were against removing Zelensky. Then there was another article published that said that Americans did not like Zelensky's approach, and he actually did not listen to them, but he did not listen to them for a reason, because Americans really don't have experience of fighting that war. And for Americans, I know what they think. This is an internal thing for Ukraine. If you want to fight in that fashion, not a question. Go fight as you like. You're a sovereign state. If they have some questions there of a different scale than the last name of the commander-in-chief. And Zelensky was not really treating Americans in any special way too. And rightly so. While nobody's listening to us, well, it's just you and me on this stream, because Americans really don't know how to fight the war of that scale. They just don't have that experience. They are now getting the first publications, some serious publications trying to research what is happening and how it is unfolding. And one American general, I heard it, I read a publication that one general actually mentioned that I heard it in one of the streams, I think it was called War Diary, right? Wink. That it is time for the United States to also have an option to use not very expensive tools, but also a lot of cheap but effective tools. Right? Interesting thought. There was one suspicious fella talking about that, I think on our stream for the last year already. Okay, there is another publication by New York Times dedicated to replacement of commander-in-chief, and they're writing the following, that Ukraine got a new commander-in-chief, the problems are the same. Entering in this new position, General Syrskyi needs to calculate the grim data when the cost of defending a territory makes you leave the territory being defended for the attacker. And this is an equation that Syrskyi had to solve many times already in the east of Ukraine. And he's got his own critics, including military personnel, that he's not always effective in making that determination on time. And they're also bringing that air defense are running out of supplies in Ukraine, and that we only have maybe a month worth of missiles. And they also talk about Carlson's interview with Putin, where they say that Putin came with a sharp statement in his interview to Carlson that Ukraine will never get back those 4 regions, and it's time to negotiate and to settle this war. So let's discuss this publication, but I'm also curious of looking at the logic of Americans about their statements of bloody equation, of whether defend Ukraine, defend Avdiivka or not, and also the shortage of air defense missiles. I don't know how true it is, but I'm curious to hear your opinion on this. Listen, Nikolay, the journalists from New York Times are romanticizing the current events, and as every romantic person, they emphasize and use all of these beautiful statements of bloody equation and other things. With military, it's much more simpler. Do our actions meet our ideas? And the second, do our ideas match the circumstance? In order to properly judge this equation, you need to know all details of situation and all details of ideas. Nobody will share that with us, so we can only discuss what is visible and available to us from outside. But in a same fashion as the doctor of 25 years of experience can understand that a person has a sore throat by a certain signs, right? I can judge what is happening, I can estimate what is happening, but I'm not giving all details what I think about that, and I'm not giving my conclusions, what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong. I'll hold them until the events unfold. But I want to say that journalists from New York Times, they're incapable of making that equation, of calculating it themselves. Syrskyi knows everything well, but if he has a political order, he had proven with his 2 years of fighting the war as a general, and even before that, that he is good at following orders from politicians. Don't rush to defend him, and don't rush to say that Zaluzhny had his own opinion and Zaluzhny doesn't, and Syrskyi doesn't. This is not so. I actually served under Syrskyi's command, and I had a personal conversation with him. Once, I want to say that he definitely has his own opinion, but his opinion is that he needs to come through following the orders of political leadership in the fashion and way that his technology and position allows to. If political command said we need to do something, army has to say yes sir and find ways to do that. The question open for public at large, is he capable to resist and to pose questions, or does he just say yes sir? Well, I think he has his own opinion and he's ready to defend it. But overall, his setup is tuned for a Moscow high military command, where he actually started part of his career. So, yeah, he needs to follow the orders. And let's ask a larger question. What do we need army for in the modern framework? To fulfill the tasks of political leadership, right? So this is straightforward and simple. And then if you ask this question in a different fashion, should the commander of infantry or commander of artillery be in agreement with commander-in-chief? Or perhaps he can have his own opinion. Or maybe a commander brigade would not be listening to a commander of corps. Each of the officers is entitled to his opinion, and they can try to defend that opinion in front of their leaders. But if the decision was made, he then needs to say yes and go execute, even if he is really against this strategy. So Syrskyi is solving an equation, not a body equation as stated by New York Times, but just a typical military equation. And he solved it times and times again, that military are there to realize the intentions of political leadership. And this is the exactly commander-in-chief that Zelensky wanted to have, while Zaluzhny had his own position. And he had an imperative of his love and care for Ukraine for a long time already. At least for the last half a year, he was seriously in disagreement with Commander-in-Chief. That could not follow for too long. When Supreme Commander and Commander-in-Chief are not in agreement, that cannot last, right? I personally think that strategy of the president is wrong. In my view, his attempt to conduct large-scale mobilization will be difficult. Let's be diplomatic here. And then use the numeric advantage of those people recruited. We are limited at 150,000 trainees at a time, so it's difficult to train this mass of people to effectively use it. And then where do you get arms to arm them properly? So I don't believe our current government is capable of passing this exam. But on the other hand, the responsibility for this ideation is not on me, it's on President, for conducting the war in this fashion. And this world is a bit more complex than we all wanted it to be. Than concerns of compatriots or journalists, they are, even from very respectable publications or important ones, they are different from reality. People live in what they see. Very often in the cartoons there is good fighting evil, right? In reality, very often it's shades of gray, of different strategies and different points of opinion. And Zelensky is just a prevailing one right now that he has a strategy and he's going to do that, to get 500,000 people in the army, and will go use that advantage and will try to realize it on the front. Syrskyi said, yes, sir, and will try to execute the task that is being set in front of us. And he probably is in agreement with this task, because he otherwise would have voiced his concerns, because he is definitely not a busboy. He is not somebody who can be pushed around. That means that he is generally in agreement with Zelensky, and he's definitely not a busboy, not that psychotype. He generally shares the views of Zelensky, and they'll be jointly executing those. Zaluzhny had a difference of opinion, and I think the history will judge us rather quickly. And we'll all see what comes out of it, except for those who will forever remain in trenches and groves. Just different kinds of strategies, and you know my opinion on that. All right, we also should mark, at least with a couple words, the form of how Valery Fedorovich, after his removal, was rewarded, was given a special award, and I think it is right that the president went for this procedure. It was public, and it looked actually pretty well. So, to start with, they actually coordinated their statement about replacement of Zaluzhny with Syrskyi. They both at the same time came out on their social media and made the statement. The formulations were proper. They hugged in front of the camera, and he got the Star of a Hero of Ukraine, which he, I think, deserves 3 times over. Although commanders-in-chief are usually not awarded during the war, but they're usually awarded after. But for Zaluzhny, in this case, it is his personal time after the battle, and he was rewarded for that, for his service to the country. So everything was done proper. It means that they followed the certain protocol. You can only imagine the strain of the actual conflict that was happening behind the screens, because we should call things the way they are. Zaluzhny's clan is being removed on all levels of our defense forces and being replaced with Syrskyi guys. And this is happening, and regardless of their good relations and others, this is the whole systemic change. Anybody who served in the army at least for 5 years, whenever you get a new commander, the whole org structure gets his teammates. And there are a lot of human tragedies happening now. Imagine how these days a general who is fighting for his country, and now he has to be moved to retirement or removed from his position. So they were preparing that regardless. They were preparing for this event. They were preparing Zaluzhny's people for this eventuality. How do we organize that? How do we make sure that nobody protests? There were several false starts to test the waters. And then a quick change during a day or two to replace a commander-in-chief for another person. And it's not an easy task to do in the times of war, when things depend on your decisions, when lives depend on your decisions. And I'm not even meaning all the scary military coups. It was more on an interpersonal level. You need to manage it, manage the expectations and the relations with people. And they've done it. They've done it not too badly. Zaluzhny followed suit, and he actually was cooperative. He understands the level of responsibility that he bears on his shoulders in front of the whole country. And I heard different conversations that people were bringing up in Telegram and other social, that people should be following Zaluzhny. It's time to rise against Zelensky. Guys, where do we go against? Because our aid from our Western allies is hanging by a thread. If there would be a coup here, say goodbye to any support from the United States. Trump and his supporters would definitely pose a big question to legitimacy of the new government, and then we run out of aerial defense missiles in about a month, and the next day after that we have 6 million refugees going to Europe and completely destroyed infrastructure in Kiev. And 2 months after, the front line could have collapsed. At first we would probably have suffered losses, they would probably go up 5 times, and then the front would just fall. And then Russian army can go and walk wherever they want. And then it's only partisan war for those who survived, and maybe another 10 million, 15 million refugees. Afghanistan, a partisan war. This is the cost of a coup attempt that some people were peddling. Zaluzhny is too responsible of a figure. He gave his oath to the country to even think in these categories right now. This is what I'm telling to those who are dreaming about a military coup and a change of power by force. And I've read a lot of those statements recently by people who are rather well socialized with tens of thousands of followers. It was madness. Oh, interesting. I did not run across too many of them. I did, unfortunately, or fortunately. But yeah, I was chiming in saying, guys, are you mad? I understand that perhaps you could have peddled these pushes after you get all the aid for the next year. But it's not going to be the fact, because arms will be coming in portions, even if you get all the money. And we don't need we need the money to a degree, but we need military aid first. So yeah, you guys should forget I was telling about any form of coup. We should be very proper. And for Zaluzhny, it was not an easy thing to do, but he synchronized his actions, and despite his own pride, despite his own personal features. And trust me, as somebody who is pretty well experienced in getting fired during the war times, it is not an easy step. He doesn't feel light now, but he did everything proper. And given that it is the beginning of his political career now, instead of his military career, if he chooses to do so. But every step is being reviewed not only under a microscope, but probably also with the best telescope, Hubble type. So everything that he does is on record now. And there are people coming out already judging him. You should not have hugged Zelensky or shook his hand. He's too smart. He already understands the consequences of every gesture of his for Ukraine. Imagine if he was leaving and did not shake Zelensky's hand or did not hug him. How would that be read? So he chose to play along, despite of all the colossal mistakes and errors made by Zelensky administration. That would have been a very wrong gesture, in my opinion, because to undermine the trust, undermine the power of current leadership, that would be a very wrong move at the moment. As an advisor, I could have played a harsher role in these things, and I'm sure Zaluzhny could have done a harsher exit as well. But on his position, he definitely had to make the right decision, and he did. Right, because some people are indeed commenting that he should have refused the gold star, that he should not have shook hands. Right, no, instead he was there. He shook hands, he received the star. He actually hugged Zelensky as a big bear. Zelensky was surprisingly a small figure compared to him. Right, so Zaluzhny played it right. He has now all chances to become a strong political figure. He already is, in some fashion. And he has a way to show how the proper civilized politics works. Because what politics is the art of work with your enemies. And the best achievement of politics from the times of Ukidid is to turn your enemy into your friend. This is the best thing that you could do. So what is a democracy that everybody is dreaming about here and saying, hey, let's be a real democracy now? Democracy is when you are in the same government with the minister whom you've hated your whole life, but and you want to spit when you see that face, but you have to shake each other's hands and work together for joint good of the country. And your ministers work, you make joint statements, because you work for the common good, you do not work for your own egos. And Zaluzhny showed that he can work for the common good, despite the fact that, trust me, his emotional state is a difficult one now. It's 100%. It's not easy to go through all that. And it's not easy for Zelensky as well, but they both demonstrated very responsible behavior. And I fully understand the drama that was happening in the office and in the command, because I've been in those corridors for 2.5 years. I know how it works. I would say they showed, if not the first, but definitely one of the biggest examples of a civilized politics in Ukraine, of the new era, of the new 32 years of Ukraine civilization. So they parted on really proper good terms. And one more thing I wanted to ask in this regard, that General Naev learned about his firing from media. So about other generals, the scale of Naev. Would a different approach be proper to his resignation? Should he have learned from social? Yeah, I think it was a mistake. If it is correct, that was a mistake. That should not have been done that way. Regardless of that, he still has his general title. A commander of joint armed forces is a serious position that is being appointed by president, and one needs to respect your military. Do you know what president is? Zelensky was ahead of 95th quarter. He went a difficult path from being an actor to a political figure. And Naev and the others were working for 35 years, starting with a trainee, with a rookie, from commander of a platoon, went through all the horrors of the 90s, when your salary was about $18, $20, and you were late on payments for about 6 months. You've been fighting this war since 2014. So if we want the army to be effective, we need to respect it. If we want teachers and doctors to be effective, we need to respect these professions. So same thing. If you are treating a general, if you're removing him, being a president, I would come to see him, or I would invite him. I would tell him that I'm sincerely thankful for the service that the general has provided, and I have made a decision to change management in the military. I'm realizing my constitutional right, so I'm replacing you from this position, and I move you under command of Minister of Defense, but I do want to shake your hand and thank you personally for your service. That would have been a proper approach in this case. Even if there was different things, you could mention that there were different things in life, right, in your relations. But to be proper, you need to actually gather his subordinates, the officers, and the person removing the general as a president or whoever is a commander is coming out and saying that, addressing the audience, saying that I want to thank you and your commander, and now I'm replacing him. I thank him for his service. I award him. I shake his hand, and I leave him at disposal of Minister of Defense. But at any time, he can reach out to me, and I appreciate your opinion and your expertise. And your removal from that position does not mean that I am stopping to pick up the phone for you. Thank you for your service. That is how you do it proper. This is called the proper procedure. You need to take care of these tails so nothing is hanging. Because when you present new general, you need to present him in person. And when you remove a general, you need to do that in person as well. This is taking full responsibility over people whom you send to fight even in general positions, in general rank, people whom you task with these difficult tasks. This is pure respect to army. This is a good commentary. Thank you, Alexei, for giving it. I think it's very important, especially for civilians. You know, there is another way to look at who is a military. It's the person who knows three concepts: approach, withdrawal, and fixation. Who knows how to approach, how to withdraw, and how to affix the change of the position. And that's it. And let's jump from strategic heights to tactical. Do you know how many real commanders are now taking oath of mobilized infantry and new recruits who have never served? I know only 2 from the whole armed forces. Perhaps there are more, but the fact that many people do not bother about that, I can guarantee you that, many commanders. Do you know what the status of a person who died without giving oath to the country? He technically is not a military. He wasn't wearing military uniform, he was on the roster of a detachment, he was getting tasks, but he is not a serviceman. And anyone can actually, if any system, any organization will take it upon themselves to fight against his relatives getting any payments, they could actually succeed in this, because there was never a record of him taking oath. And it would be interesting to know how many of them died without giving this oath. And even if they took this oath, the procedure was probably violated, because one of the elements of it is to shoot your weapon, and this is a part of it. This is official part of the oath, and it needs to happen near the banner, holding your arm or gun or pistol in your right hand. and there's a certain position and posture that you have to do. And a commander needs to organize that even in the most difficult conditions. And on the first line, we only should have people who have taken oath properly. So this is again about approach, withdrawal, and fixation. And it's also about motivation, Alexei. I'm actually surprised that you were saying that our servicemen are not getting their oath done properly en masse. I wouldn't say en masse, but there definitely are lapses in these numbers. I would actually recommend some of the generals to get the data on that and to find how many of the servicemen died without getting their oath procedure completed. And those servicemen who have never given the oath, they actually can write in the comments to this video and let us know that, yeah, if you never get the oath procedure or if it was done with violations. Because to a very large degree, the ceremony has to proceed properly. This is what motivates the fighter. When he is treated as a sack of potatoes, when he's just thrown in a certain place and nobody cares, that's not right. A person needs to go through a proper procedure, proper ritual. He needs to read this oath, shoot the weapon, and the commander needs to take this oath and follow his protocol as well. Only after that, the person can be sent to fulfill tasks, especially on the front. And I can tell you that I know cases for sure when people were taken from the street in Odessa on Kryvyi Rog. They were thrown in less than 1 day to the front, and they died there without having a chance to take an oath. We had difficult times in our defense when these things happened. So this is an example. And this is about the culture with both generals and lower rank infantry. A very important commentary, Alexei, on the second year of this war, at the end of the second year of this war. We're finally getting to digging these questions up that are strangely amiss in the culture of our days, of the way we fight. Well, you know, our army still is yet to become an army. When it was diluted by so many civilians, it is neither army nor armed forces. We carry that formally, that title, but it's a big group of people with a very big and specific military experience, bigger than anybody else in the world, but it's not fully an army. First of all, not enough cadre officers. Second, many of them have a lot of traditions that they're not following. And this is a long and delicate road ahead of us to make our armed forces a proper army. All right, let's go to the next topic. Putin and his interview to Tucker Carlson. It birthed a lot of commentary, including yours. And I want to say mine first, as a hypothesis, if you let me, that I will transform into a question. So, first thing, all the meta-historical narrative, all the interpretations of history that he stated, which most people, or many people, consider to be the main highlights of his interview, it appears that they are secondary for his own point of view. If you watch it to the end, where he says that, I'm actually ready for negotiations. He is sending signals that he is ready for negotiations. But he's saying that if we follow the balance of powers that we have on the front, that it doesn't allow us to go into negotiations, then all that history about 2007, about collective security, about NATO and their encroachment on Russian areas of influence, I'm ready to repeat that mantra forever till we sit down and negotiate. Do I read it right that meta-historical narrative is secondary for him? It is more of justification for him, which is he's not using or eager to seriously discuss. He's just using it as a base for his actions and for pushing for negotiations. And he is sending a very definite signal that he is ready to negotiate. At the same time, he is talking about collective security that you actualize in our streams for quite a while too. And you did highlight that same system of missile defense that he talked about in terms of missile defense with the United States. All right, Nikolay, let me talk to the level to 2 ranks above, to the general lieutenant. instead of colonel. Several theses about Putin's interview and Putin in general. Putin is very wrongly estimated, both in Ukraine and on the West. He's being viewed through the prism of liberal optics, very left liberal optics. And they're trying to create a marginalized creature, a black demon or a fascist or a new Voldemort on one hand, and the same people in the next sentence, in the next argument, very often in the first sentence, after a comma, follow the logic, are saying that he is an old senile gramps and it's not important what he is saying. So let's logically object to both theses. The objection to the first one, that he is a monster who is telling pseudo-historic tales. A monster would probably not give an interview to Tucker. If President of Ukraine and President of the United States would have given the same interview, everybody would have listened to, right? And imagine our president dispels pseudo-historic message said by Putin, and Biden puts a big fat dot in that process too. Do you think we'll see that? We won't, even though Tucker offered that. Second, about senile Gramps who is talking gibberish and who has who's of no consequence in this world. Let's write Putin from a small letter and Russian Federation with small letters, and let's put a spell on this interview. I have a validation question here. If that senile old man who is spitting gibberish, how did he manage to destroy your strong international system? How the country that has a budget smaller than the state of New York is interfering with the elections in the United States and is shaking the whole global order and is aiding the global South to take a firmer position against the global North or global West. Do you guys, can they take a single position? Because otherwise it looks like you're 4-year-olds seeing a scared thing, closing your eyes and putting a spell on the monster, saying that, oh, it's not a monster, I'm not afraid. At the same time, we can hear the rhetoric that he is a monster destroying Ukraine, destroying the economy of the United States. So either he is a senile old man or he is a monster that he is destroying the global world order. Otherwise, when you combine both, it's illogical. Now, my estimation. Putin is the most liberal politician of who were recently in power in Russia, on the serious positions like president or prime minister. He is still a liberal. He still holds Grev on his savings bank, a national savings bank, who is super liberal financier. And that horrible fascist figure, Putin, is still following recommendations of International Monetary Fund. Iran is not following IMF recommendations. Putin is still following them. What scary, dark, fascist monster are you talking about? And I'm not talking about whitewashing Putin, even though I think somebody in Russia may say that I deserve the status of General Colonel of FSB after this speech, and some of Ukrainians will pick up on that. But the thing is that every game, every chess game, starts with a proper estimation of positions. If you make a mistake there, at this stage, you will likely not win the game. And Putin is making a very certain thing that you noticed, actually. He is saying that I do not want to fight. Nikolay, I'm giving you 121%. This is a very unpopular thought, but he indeed does not want to fight. It is difficult for him to fight. It is morally difficult for him. It is especially morally difficult to fight with Ukraine. Because when he says this is the same single people, MFR actually does believe in that. For him, it's civil war. He has to kill his own. We can laugh at that and say that Ukrainians are very separate, but that's the way he thinks. Politicians very often say exactly what they think, by the way. After being for 2.5 years in big politics, I want to say that in 95% of cases, they actually say what they think, because you have to be motivated to manage these huge masses and events. And on fake motivation, you cannot go too far. There's so much energy brooding there that you either are representing what you believe or you'll burn. So he's pretty sincere, in my estimation, when he says that if these articles were followed, there would be no war. And even if now you will follow them, there will be no war. I will stop it. No consumption of Ukraine by Russia. He does not go for that. He does not intend the death of the West. He is still rather pro-Western figure. The only two wishes that he openly expressed and that he turned into goals and is still going to them through like a tooth pain is first, that he would be accepted as equal on the West with respect. He repeats that thought again at the beginning. Are we talking seriously or not? Because if it's not serious, I don't care, right? And note, this is the first interview to the Western media after the beginning of this war. So he wanted to verify that it is serious. And second suggestion to Ukraine, he says everything that was in Istanbul minus 4 regions that Russia already annexed. So I heard an opinion, Alexei, that we agreed everything in Istanbul and we need to somehow get back to what was there. I'm reading through his statement that he is ready to come back. There are options how to do that respectably, but we need to deblock the negotiation process, and for that, Zelensky's decree needs to be cancelled. So first thing, going from here, do you believe, because you've said times and times again, that whatever we got in Istanbul, we will never get these conditions again? And yet again, Putin comes out and says that Istanbul framework is valid. He is saying everything as in Istanbul, but now they will be asking for 4 regions: Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donetsk, and Lugansk, plus Crimea. Back then, they were ready, and I've said that times again, but I'll repeat again. Back then, they were ready, in exchange for neutral status, to withdraw their troops from the whole Ukraine, including Lugansk and Donetsk regions. Not 23rd of February, from the whole territory of Ukraine. And in Crimea, they're ready to discuss a commission, demilitarization, and other things. There was an ideal package that we probably will never see again. Next suggestion from his side, if we finish and do not take this one, will probably be worse than that Istanbul plus 4 regions. But I think even now he is ready to discuss, and we probably can come to an agreement on something lesser than Istanbul plus 4 regions. We might come to an agreement on 2 regions, perhaps. He doesn't want to fight. Even on his horoscope, he is Libra, so it's difficult for him to make these decisions, to a big dissatisfaction of the right specter of Russia that wants to fight to the end, to join that holy Russia and all. Follow Girkin and the others. By the way, Putin put Girkin in jail for that. And there are a lot of upset on the right spectrum, including pretty high politicians. NATO is weak. Let's finish with Ukraine and go to Lvov and reach the borders of 91. Sure, let's restore the ones that existed for 23rd of August of 91. So, in my estimation, he does not appreciate intense borderline decisions, but unlike many other Western politicians, he has another feature. He can make himself to realize unpopular decisions, which he doesn't want to execute. He can take political responsibility for that and historic responsibility for that. That's why he's saying we don't want to, but if you don't fulfill points 1, 2, and 3, we will continue using force to achieve them. So let's clarify here. There is Istanbul Agreement, which were prepared by Arahamia's team there, and you were part of it, about withdrawal troops from Donbass and all. Now you're saying Istanbul plus 4 regions. I did not hear 4 regions. Well, he's not making that statement at the table. That's what I'm reading. That's what I'm translating to you, given the information that I have and what I saw in Istanbul. Right, still, but he still says that I'm ready to return to Istanbul. Everything was already negotiated there, and there are ways to do that honorably. So he's demonstrating his wish to enter the negotiations, basically hinting at them, almost winking, right? Indeed, Nikolay, he seriously wants negotiations. He is sending this message. He's straight as an arrow in this regard, in this desire. And he wants it because of 3 groups of reasons. To be continued in part 2.